This following program is run by an untrained professional with no credentials. All events talked about are allegedly real and may seem unsettling to some listeners. This first story comes to us from the heart of Dover, Massachusetts, a town about 20 miles to the west of Boston. This story has its fame for being one of Massachusetts' most popular cryptid stories. It takes place in 1977, where the local sightings of a humanoid being at night in the small town of Dover, Mass. were reported along with many other strange happenings. The story went something like this. A group of 3 boys, all aged about 17 years old, were driving down Farm Street at around 10:30 p.m. After some time of driving by trees and houses, the group began to get tired from driving this late. But before anyone could think, the headlights on the SUV landed on a small wall of stones. One of the boys, William Bartlett, spotted something perched on top of the wall. The boy couldn't tell what it was at first, but once they got a little closer, Bartlett started to think to himself, "Is this a dog?" There was just one problem. It was not a dog. As the headlights landed on the mysterious figure, it all came into view. It had large eyes with no visible eyelids. It had a large head and a small neck. The creature suddenly turned and stared into the direction of the car's headlights. Its eyes were almost glowing in an orange-like color. The creature was also quite thin with long arms and legs. This encounter only lasted for seconds, and yet Bartlett was so shocked by this that he could remember every moment of it. In fact, strangely enough, no one else in the car noticed the creature, nor would any of them listen to what Bartlett said. Not much later, Bartlett had finally dropped off his friends and made his way to his house. Once home, one of the first things he did was draw a few sketches of what he saw. Now, this was not the only encounter with the so-called Dover Demon. There was another sighting that took place a little later the same night after midnight. "15-year-old John Baxter had just left his friend's house and was walking to his home. He walked about a mile when he noticed what looked like a short silhouette of a person walking towards him. He assumed it was a friend and called out to them. The person did not respond and continued walking towards him. Baxter was starting to get a little nervous and started to worry about who this person was. After a short amount of time, the person stopped, and Baxter quickly stopped himself and shouted angrily at the figure. The figure bolted off into the woods, and Baxter, really enraged at this point, took off running as well. He started chasing the mysterious figure, following the sounds of its footsteps. He came to a halt by a tree, and in front of him, there it was, about 30 feet away. The being looked straight at John and gripped its hands on a tree, and just as fast as he had chased the being, Baxter had taken off running like a cheetah in the opposite direction and did not stop running until he was picked up by a couple driving late at night and driven back to his house. Baxter also had drawn a picture of the creature some time after. What makes this story so intense, in my opinion, was the fact that Baxter was not in the safety of a car like William was. Baxter was all alone at night and came across this being in the woods. He was even followed by it for a short amount of time. And similarly to the first story, there was one more sighting that took place in a car late at night. The story goes a 15-year-old girl named Abby Brabham and her guardian were driving home at night. Abby claims to have seen a mysterious figure on the side of the road. On a closer inspection, she saw it had large green glowing eyes and was quite thin. It had no other facial features other than its eyes. What makes this sighting different from the rest is both witnesses in the previous two claimed the being had orange eyes rather than green. That's basically it for this story. It was a cryptid that was spotted 3 times in Dover, Massachusetts from the night of April 23rd, 1977 to the night of April 24th, 1977. And now I think I'm going to break this story down and give it a rating from 0 to 100 on the plausibility scale. Let's focus on the first theory. Some say the teens worked together to create a hoax for attention. I mean, it may seem obvious, but to be honest, we don't really have any evidence to prove that's the case. Let's not jump to conclusions just yet. Let's learn a little bit more about these 3 witnesses. The 3 of them claim to never even have met each other before. The family and people in close relationships to the witnesses had also confirmed this to be true. The witnesses had never met each other before. Another thing is people who were close to the witnesses also claimed that they were not really the type of people to lie about something like this. I will admit that I do find it a little weird that the 3 teens that happened to go to the same high school just so happened to be the only 3 witnesses. But again, I can't jump to conclusions without any good evidence. I personally think if this was made up, I believe they would probably try to make it a little more crazy. Of course, they could have done that on purpose to make it more believable. But really, I think I would just be speculating at that point. There really isn't any evidence to prove that this was outright faked. Now for the second theory. Was this an animal of some sort? The most popular theory, in my opinion, is that some say it was probably a baby moose. A silhouette of a baby moose could match the description given by the 3 witnesses under certain types of lighting, such as the lights of a car. But the only problem is, in Baxter's story, he was not only outside and not in a car, but he was also just feet away from the being, and probably got a better look at it than the other witnesses. Of course, the moose explanation could explain why the creature raced away the way it did when he was approached. But the only other issue is that the mooses are not really a thing in Massachusetts at the time. Also, there was no sightings of any mooses after the events. Wouldn't it make more sense for someone to have found it later or found any adult mooses later on? This theory also has a flaw with the fact that it wouldn't make much sense that all 3 of the witnesses claim to have seen the exact same being. How come everyone that saw it not only thought it looked supernatural, but the exact same way as everyone else. This is the final theory I'll be talking about for this story. Let's say the three witnesses are telling the truth, and they really did see something supernatural. And let's also pretend that this was not an animal of any sort. That just leaves us with one question. What was it? Well, all I can say is there really is no evidence to prove what it was, and it's mostly speculation. But what I can say is there really isn't anything to prove against it being supernatural either. So this theory just is a dead end. Overall, I give this a 52% on the brain dead scale. My ratings are based on how likely I believe this story to be true, and in this case, I'm ranking it on how likely I believe that the three teens actually saw something supernatural. The reason I'm giving it this rating is because there is great evidence to prove that they weren't lying, and there is also great evidence to prove they didn't just see an animal, but there is not much evidence to prove that it was supernatural at all. It's mostly speculation rather than evidence. There is also a serious lack of physical evidence. There wasn't any mysterious claw marks or footprints found nearby, and there was not any other witnesses to the event other than these three teens. In short, all I can say is this case's lack of evidence makes it harder for me to come to a clear conclusion.